You stand in the center of a clearing. Grass whispers around your feet. The sky is a lid of cold blue, and somewhere beyond the trees, a small stream murmurs unchanged, patient. In your hands there is a blade, and it feels like an extension of your forearm, familiar, balanced, waiting. Everybody expects motion. They brace for drama, for speed, for the moment when the world explodes into action. But you don't move. You don't need to. This is not a story about who can swing the fastest. It's not about who yells the loudest or who tries hardest to convince the world of their danger. It's about a quieter and more decisive quality, stillness. About how, in the moments before a fight, a person becomes more than muscle and more than momentum. They become judgment. They become inevitability. They become the one who, by appearing almost entirely calm, forces the outcome before the blade ever slides. Think of sword fighting as a theater of consequences. Unlike a fist or a club, a sword does not cheat. It doesn't let you hide mistakes. Every step you take is recorded in muscle memory and in balance. Every twitch is an invitation. Every overcommitted lunge becomes a vulnerability. The sword is a judge that magnifies intent. When you pick it up, you accept this. You accept that your decisions will be permanent and that the space between thought and consequence is painfully short. Now picture two fighters. One is all motion, quick feet, flashing strikes, breath coming hard. He looks impressive, a blur of effort. The other is calm, small, economical movements, eyes steady. People assume the first is dangerous. He moves so much, how could he not win? But movement alone exposes patterns. It draws attention. It creates openings. The one who seems still is actually making fewer offers to be hit. He's compressing possibility. Speed is seductive. Movies have trained us to equate danger with velocity. Faster, faster, faster. Real swordsmanship tells another tale. Excessive motion eats structure. When you move rapidly without investment in balance and alignment, you sacrifice the foundation that supports every strike. A fast arm with no stable core is just a noisemaker. It looks effective, and that's enough to sway spectators. But in a real exchange, precision matters far more than acceleration. A single, well-placed action often outweighs a dozen frantic attempts. This is where discipline steps in. Stillness is not a lack of energy. It's energy conserved and directed. The still swordsman is not inert. He is alert and economical. He waits until the right fraction of a second and then acts with intention that cannot be undone. When you train for that kind of restraint, you learn to strip away everything unnecessary. You remove flair, you minimize tension, and you cut down motion to the bare essentials. What remains is terrifyingly effective. Remember, strength can be deceptive. A powerful strike that comes from a poorly anchored body collapses under its own weight. The body is geometry first and force second. Balance, alignment, and distance govern whether a strike lands or misses. Think of structure as the scaffolding that lets force be meaningful. Without it, power is wasted, and you open yourself up. A powerful man with bad timing is easier to beat than a moderate man with perfect timing. Efficiency of motion beats raw strength in close quarters almost every time. Economy of motion is its own art. Big movements are showy and obvious. They telegraph intention. Small, precise adjustments do multiple jobs at once. They reposition, they threaten, they gather information, and they conserve. You watch the opponent for a twitch that betrays weight shifting. You reposition your foot in a way that subtly reduces their angle of attack. A tilt of the wrist becomes an invitation or a feint. Nothing you do is wasted. Each gesture is layered with meaning. When you speak like that with your body, the situation narrows, and the number of possible outcomes shrinks in your favor. But it isn't just the body that's trained. The mind is the primary arena of the fight. Before blades meet, minds collide. Fear warps perception. Anxiety speeds up timing. It makes you see hazards that aren't there and miss the ones that are. Aggression fragments judgment. When you rush, you offer your center to be cut. Composure, on the other hand, is a weapon. When you don't panic, you force the other to make a choice. People hate making choices under pressure. They tend to choose badly. If you allow tension to build without giving into it, your opponent will try to resolve it with movement. That movement will be a compromise, an opening that you can exploit. Distance is the invisible ruler of combat. It is not a single number, but a constant negotiation. Too close, and your blade becomes entangled, your form collapses. Too far, and your reach is meaningless. Masters of the sword don't fixate on one spot. They manipulate spacing with tiny foot adjustments, subtle changes in angle, and by using the environment like a conversation partner. Timing is the point where sameness snaps into difference. Speed helps, but timing decides. Imagine someone delivering a blow with perfect timing. It lands with minimal force, yet maximum effect. Or consider the slow, patient pull that invites and then counters. It's not the frequency of blows, but the correctness of one blow that matters. A strike at the wrong time is wasted energy. At the right time, it can be terminal. You train to read the rhythm of another's balance and breathing, to find the one moment where all their defenses are thin. When a blade becomes an extension of mind, something subtle happens. You stop checking position. You feel it. Movement becomes less about forcing and more about perceiving. The sword is no longer an object you manipulate. It is part of your sensory vocabulary. A shift in weight, a change in breath, a tiny deviation in angle, these become data. Your response becomes less deliberate and more instinctive because perception and action have merged. The act of parrying or cutting ceases to be mechanical. It becomes a conversation of impulses that you lead rather than react to. Observers often mistake ease for lack of effort. They expect to see strain, to hear the grunt, to watch muscles bunched and thunderous swings. What they miss is that what looks like ease is highly curated. The easiest move to watch is often the hardest to perform correctly. When everything unnecessary is gone, what remains is flow. A minimal spare motion that is perfectly timed looks almost lazy because it hides the layers of preparation beneath it. The person who seems to do less has done more. Years of trimming away mistakes, refining balance, and learning to trust judgment over impulse. There is another paradox here. Mastery reduces the need for the tool. A skilled swordsman can disarm a conflict before steel speaks. Through posture, through unblinking calm, through the threat that is so credible it is unnecessary, many clashes end with no blood spilled. The blade amplifies judgment, but judgment often prevents the blade from being used. When you maintain composure, you remove the theater of chaos. People look for a signal. They scan for aggression. If you refuse to give them one, they either act badly or they back down. Let's walk through how that looks in practical terms. You're facing someone who wants to assert dominance. They step forward. Your feet are loose but centered. Your knees are soft, your shoulders loose. You breathe slowly. Your eyes find the opponent's chest and then the hands, where intention is most visible. You make no hostile gestures. You don't scream for effect. Instead, you narrow your field of possible responses. If they rush, a slight pivot opens an angle that makes their line longer and less effective. You don't rush to meet them. You let them extend into imbalance. If they retreat, you close the distance just enough to keep them inside a favorable range. Each of your tiny choices bends the encounter toward a single likely conclusion, their error and your response. There will be moments when something must be done, when waiting would be insanity. Stillness does not imply paralysis. It implies reaching a decision and committing with clarity. When you choose to act, you do so with the economy that made the waiting advantageous. There is no flurry. There is one decisive motion. You do not wonder whether it will be enough. You've already forced the conditions that made it so. That pressure is a decision-making weapon. It forces others to resolve their tension, and they usually do it badly. In guessing, it will mismatch truth and instinct. The person who is still uses that gap. They let the opponent commit to a guess, then they exploit that guess. It's almost cruel in its effectiveness, because it's so subtle. Let's talk about learning this. You can't fake stillness. You can mimic calm for a few breaths, sure, but real composure comes from competence under pressure. Training should target 3 areas: structure, sensory awareness, and decision economy. Structure means posture and balance drills until they are reflexive. Sensory awareness involves exercises that tune you to weight shifts and breathing, your own and your opponent's. Decision economy means practicing scenarios where you must choose one effective action instead of many mediocre ones. Rehearse restraint until it becomes second nature. When under stress, your default should be the minimal sufficient action. There are also ethical contours here. The idea of most dangerous could be read as simply praising violence. It shouldn't be. The most dangerous swordsman is dangerous because he can end a conflict quickly and cleanly, not because he delights in it. Skill allows for control. It reduces collateral harm. Someone who can end a fight with a single, precise intervention is less likely to cause lasting damage than someone who swings wildly and prays. Mastery thus becomes a responsible posture. You carry power, but you don't broadcast it. You protect others by being restrained rather than reckless. Understand, too, that the techniques translate beyond the blade. The same principles apply to business negotiations, crisis management, parenting under stress, or any situation where stakes are real and emotions run hot. Power is often most persuasive when it is quiet. People respond to calm direction more readily than to loud demand. If you can learn to compress possibility, to manage distance in conversation, to time your interventions precisely, you will often win without creating a spectacle. The sword becomes a metaphor for clarity of intent. In the end, the most dangerous person in any contest is not necessarily the strongest, the fastest, or the loudest. They are the one who controls the tempo, who narrows choices, and who removes wasted motion. They are the one who can wait, who reads the room or the clearing, and who acts only when the action will be decisive. Their stillness is not absence. It is a concentrated form of pressure. It is patience deployed as a blade, and that, more than any flash of movement, decides outcomes. So when you're next tempted to believe that the loudest, fastest, or angriest person will triumph, remember the clearing. Remember the calm person who seems to be doing nothing. Watch how others move around them, how their panic grows. Notice how the tiny choices reshape the situation into an inevitability. The blade does the cutting, certainly, but the cut follows a long and quiet process of decision. The real weapon was never the steel in the hand. It was the judgment in the head, the posture that refused to be hurried, and the commitment to a single, minimal, devastatingly effective action. If you want to take this into your life, practice the habit of restraint. Train your body to be efficient. Train your mind to see the few crucial cues that foreshadow action. Trim the excess from your reactions. Learn to hold tension without giving it away. Once you do, you'll notice something interesting. Conflict resolves itself more often than you'd expect, and when it doesn't, you have the tools to finish it cleanly. That is the power of stillness. So stand there for a moment. Feel the balance through your feet. Breathe slow. Let the world hurry past in its frenzy. When the time comes, when the moment cries out for a decision, you'll move, not because you had to, but because you chose to. And in that choosing, you decide the outcome before the blade ever moves.